Okay, so hi Darius, how are you?
I'm good, Megan. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah. How's your morning been so far?
It's been good. It's my study day, so I'm taking things slower than usual, but I have to get on with it later. What about you?
Yeah, I'm the same really. Like I've not had the highest motivation levels today, so going for a walk and then gonna start with some uni work after this, hopefully. Fingers crossed. What have you got on at the moment? Have you got like uni exams or anything that you need to revise for?
Yeah, oh, not exams yet. Exams are all going to be, I think, in May, and I need to start revising for them. But just a lot of assignments. Got a couple due like next week, and then we have lectures again next week as well. I'm sure more will come.
So what's your specialism? Like what are you?
So I'm doing an STP in neurophysiology, which means you have to do a master's in clinical science, neurosensory science, which means that they've coupled together audiology, neurophysiology, and ophthalmic and vision sciences together.
Wow, that sounds very confusing. I know nothing about any of those three. So
Yeah. Well, we're having to learn about each person's thing, and we have to do rotations in it, so it's interesting,
yeah.
I
Do
guess.
you have much experience in audiology and ophthalmic or?
No, no, not even at uni. I don't even actually think I covered eyes or ears in my undergrad at all. So it's completely new, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fun. I guess that's the nice thing about the first year is they know not everyone's done things before, so they kind of go through it all uh, without bringing in all of the complex things right at the start.
Yeah.
That's good. So what it was your background before the STP? Like how have you got onto neurophysiology?
So it's kind of like it's not like the typical, I've been in love with neurophysiology since the day I was born. Um, so I did my undergrad in pharmacology
Okay.
and in the University of Kent, pharmacology and physiology. And then I did a placement in between my second and third year, where I worked in like clinical research at like a big pharma company. And it was really cool. Like I had a lot of really cool opportunities, actually working on real life clinical trials. And something I actually always wanted to do because at that point, the team I was in was like the first time the drug was coming into human beings, and I was working in rare diseases, so we got to do like a bunch of different cool studies. I haven't got to go to Sweden, loads of different conventions. Like it was like what you think the typical like lifestyle is, like nice dinners and all these places. But then like those are the highlights. But then the majority of the day is like a cold December Tuesday. All the buildings are grey, and like you're just in a meeting, and all they're talking about is the budget and the timeline. You're just like, oh my god, I hate this. Then I decided that I had to do something that was a mix of like actively working clinically, but also doing research. So then I had to come back to uni, and then my final year, and I had to decide like, okay, what do I really want to do? So then I thought about the STP. I applied for it. So I graduated in 2019. I applied for it that year. So then initially, so I applied for cardiac sciences and neurophys. And then I didn't get neurophys, and then I put on a waiting list for cardiac. But then the situation was, say it was like a Wednesday afternoon. I remember because I was working on my dissertation, which was due on a Friday. And then I got an email from the STP, like, come for an interview on Monday. So then I was like, oh my God. So then I just had to finish my disso. And then as soon as I submitted my disso, then I started writing for the interview. And I was in Kent and I had to go all the way up to Birmingham. So yes, I went for the interview. I thought it was okay. It was tough because I'd never done like the MMI structure, like the old structure in Birmingham. Where you do like you do 4 different stations and then 10 minutes each station. So it was like quite a daunting experience. And I'd never been to an interview. Like with my placement, I was in there for like 2 hours talking about me personally. And then the STP one is like, it's not really about you. It's about what do you know, move on to the next station. So then I did that and then I got put on the waiting list to get a spot. And I didn't get the spot in the end. Sad, sad. So then, you know, I had to kind of like, because I didn't want to go back into pharma. I applied for other NHS jobs. It wasn't really working out. And then I got a job at Homerton University Hospital in Hackney in London, in a sickle cell and thalassemia service. And sickle cell is a condition that's really important to me, and I've always wanted to like learn a lot more about clinically. But the role really wasn't scientific, nor was it clinical. It was actually helping the patients with like psychosocial issues, because with that condition, your social life and your mental state can have a high impact on like the clinical characteristics. You know, it can increase your levels of pain, your more increased hospital admissions, stuff like that. So it was really interesting to work in the NHS and kind of do the grunt work. Like it was hard, and it was hard not to take the problems home with you, especially when you relate with the patients. But I mean, I did pick up a lot of skills, you know, my compassion, and so on and so forth. So I applied for the STP again, and then I got the interview for Neurophys, and I started the Neurophys.
It sounds so good because you kind of had experience in all of the different positions. Like, that's off to you being able to do the patient-facing role, because I would find that so difficult. Like, if a patient started crying at me, I'd probably cry with them. Like, I would not handle that well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I think what I really wanted something that I would be dealing with people every day, because I'm kind of person that gets bored quite quickly. And then yeah, I definitely had to learn how to, especially in my previous job, especially because with people's social circumstances, you're really like on the border of them really getting personal, really stuck. And I had that quite a number of times in that job, you know, patients crying, situations that I can't really help. The thing I would advise people is that it's really easy in that circumstance to develop like empathy fatigue, where you deal with situations so often, difficult situations, that your bar for empathy is so high, so that you're not giving the next patient that same level of empathy you may have given the one like a month ago, because you just don't have it in you to give more empathy because you've given it all.
You're like emotionally exhausted as well.
Yeah.
Sounds so good. So would you, like, looking back on your placement year, would you do it again if you got the opportunity, like within a clinical setting? Would you kind of I'm not wording this well.
If it was more of a clinical,
yeah,
I mean, definitely. I mean, the thing with clinical research is that, you know, the NHS is like the rate limiting step. So even the company in the UK, the company can do all its like preliminary lab stuff, but in terms of human studies, it has to be done through the NHS. And obviously, when you do a study in the NHS, they would want it to be like the health professionals actually conducting the study, like doctors, nurses. So obviously, as I wasn't a healthcare professional at that point, I couldn't actually do it. But the good thing is that my manager was like a clinician in his old days. So, you know, I would get to go onto the unit sometimes, and he would teach me like phlebotomy, taking blood, or insert a cannula, because he saw that I was interested in that stuff. And I think the good thing, because it was a big company, it was GlaxoSmithKline, and because as a placement student, similarly to the NHS, you have a lot of scope to try new things. You're not like banged into your job. Like they've hired you kind of to learn and to improve yourself. I got to go to different things. So there was a blood unit on site, which they would take like blood from staff members to use in the research in some of the labs. So I got to do that, and I got to see different things. I think I would keep the placement as is, because I hope to then in future, when I'm old and I don't like people anymore, go back to clinical research and utilize my knowledge of the process then. So I wouldn't change it. And yeah, I mean, it was good. It was a lot of experiences. And I feel very lucky, because most people, especially in science, you don't really get paid for your placements as well. And if it's an NHS, they'll work you to the bone. So, you know, I think I'm complaining too much. It was a good year.
Yeah, definitely pros and cons for everything, but it sounds like such good experience. So how did you find, you've done both of the interviews, how did you find each one? Like, which one did you think was better?
I would say I'm not really. I don't know. I think for me personally, from two approaches. For me personally, I found the 2020 process better, obviously because I got in, but mostly because of the last step of it. Because I felt like the difference between the 20. I don't know. Do you think I need to explain the whole difference?
I don't think you need to explain the
Okay,
difference
cool.
better. Just
So obviously 2020, I just interviewed with the trust, and it was just one of the consultants, the lead consultant at my trust, and the lead clinical scientist. And I feel like even though it was still like similarly to the same set of questions about the four main areas, two on neurophys, one on science, one on values, I felt like I had a greater opportunity to express myself. And also, when you go to an interview like the one in Birmingham, you know, as a black person in the UK, you have to consider greatly the likelihood of discrimination in that sense from the people that are interviewing you. So I felt like with just interviewing at the trust, there was less scope for that, and there was a better opportunity for me to show myself past my ability, which is what I think is more important to do, because yes, the premise of the STP is for them to teach you, and I feel like the trust are more concerned about will you work in this team, will you work in the department, because even though you're supernumerary and you're not including the departmental numbers, you have to be able to work as part of the team in order to learn. Because it's not going to be. I mean, with COVID, it's not going to be normal, right? The routine schedule. You might be friendly to this, you might be friendly to that, and you have to be able to work within the team. Obviously, the downside of that is that between shortlisting and interviews, once again, the likelihood of discrimination is higher because you've gone from a 3-to-1 ratio to a 1-to-1 ratio. So that you're the only person that gets to interview for that spot first. And obviously, if you don't do well, it goes to the next person. So obviously, you have to think about that. Like, will somebody not potentially understand with the previous questions, kind of the cultural background to my answers and the significance of what I may have had to do coming from a low socioeconomic area, as opposed to somebody who's had greater advantages, and if somebody would be able to contextualize that.
Yeah.
Obviously, 2019, it's tough, but obviously it has the thing where obviously 3 people are allowed to interview for one position. And it was tough. Like the MMIs are really a weird experience. There's a lot of people. You don't really get to talk to people beforehand. You just go in, you just do it, and you just leave. And you get them, and you're thinking, what? What is happening? So yeah, I would say 2020 is better. I think improvements have been made for 2021 applicants as well, with the school taking out the abstract reasoning and numerical reasoning, replacing that with situational judgment, which I think greatly reflects the values you need to conduct the roles of a clinical scientist. And I think, and the other difficult thing is that I think the good thing is that they've changed it so you can only apply for one specialism. Because talking to my colleagues that are in neurophys, it sounded like even though they applied for 2 specialisms, some of them chose to apply for one, they really directed their application at one specialism. But for me, understanding the context of the university attainment gap and then how that leads to people from ethnic minority backgrounds, their difficulty in getting roles, I couldn't just neglect one specialism because I'm cutting my chances of getting onto this program by 50%.
Yeah.
I had to really think hard about how I worded certain things in my questions to make sure that I didn't alienate one specialism. Because even if it wasn't the one that I desired the most, I still had the opportunity to, develop in this profession. And I have interest in kind of the whole body. So, the different specialisms, they all have certain pros and cons for me.
It's interesting that you got an interview for like both specialisms as well, like both cardiac and then neurophys.
Yeah. To be fair, I think the good thing is that it seems that the difficulty of the questions is standardized between those 2 specialisms. Obviously, I can't speak for the physics side of it or the life sciences side of it. But I think for those 2 specialisms, the questions weren't like outrageous for one and super difficult for the other.
Cool. But that was some really good insight, especially like for me personally, I didn't do the 2019 interview. I didn't get through to the interview stages. So it's interesting to hear about like how that might have affected me coming from like a white background and stuff. And it's just interesting to kind of put it into perspective. Cool. So I just got some notes. Was it what you expected then? Was the face-to-face interview what you expected?
The one in Birmingham, or so
Yeah.
2019, I don't know what I expected, to be honest, because I had like, so I've had friends that have gone to medical school, which means they would have had to do the MMIs as well. But they gave me advice on it, and they told me that it's not like a normal interview, especially because before that, you know, all my interviews were for placement, and they were like, you know, a lot about me and what I can bring to this and that. And I was quite shocked because, you know, I think when you prepare for an interview, you know, you prepare like, well, how do my values match up, and how does this experience mean this? And it was shocking, and it was a good experience. I think the word is I went through the ringer. Like it was good. Like it was quite high intensity, and like basically so they like split the room into like 8 bays. So 4 people are interviewing on that side, 4 people are interviewing on this side, and in each side you have like a little space with 2 dividers where you sit for 2 minutes, and the room is just completely silent, and all you can see is the person like across the room from you who's interviewing on that side, and you're both just looking at each other for 2 minutes, and then you get up and you go into the first section. It's just 2 interviewers, just like non-stop, like 10 minutes, and then they press a bell, a ding goes off, and even if you're mid-sentence, you have to get up, and you have to go sit down again, and then you're just like, oh my, what the hell is this like? And then you just have to compose yourself to ready to go to the next section. There isn't any time to kind of like be sad that you may have forgotten this answer, because, you know, the next step, you don't want to fall into the next step and, you know, have things accumulate. I think the 2020 was a lot more business as usual. And I think it was good because they did also, I mean, they definitely drilled me on the science. I mean, there was a point where like, I must have been asked a question and I had no idea what the answer was, and I had to ask them to like spell out the word. And I felt like I eventually confused them enough for them to move on. I was just like, so could you? And then they kept, the 2 interviews kept going back and forth about how to spell it, and then eventually they were just like, oh, just forget about it. Move on. But then obviously, and then at the end, we had a lot more scope for them to like ask about me personally and the things that I had been involved with and all that stuff. So it was, I think that's a better way to do it.
Do you see the people that interviewed you at all? Are they like
the
department?
Yeah, exactly. So the lead clinical scientist is like my clinical supervisor. So he marks off all my competencies and stuff. He teaches me like most of the theory, even though he's part-time now, and I learn from my other colleagues. But in terms of like because he's like old school, like, he's he's been in this field for so long, so he teaches me like the old school nitty-gritty. And then the other interview is just like the lead consultant, so he's just always around doing what these consultants do.
Yeah. That's good though. It's nice to feel like they wanted you there, like wanted you to be in the team. That's definitely okay. Just like on the interview process, I definitely didn't word what I said right before. How do you think the school could like improve it? So obviously there was the letter that went to the school about BAME applicants like last year. So
selfish plug. So I'm part of the team that put together the letter. The STP, no, the NHS scientist BAME network, because we didn't want to exclude PTPs, HSSTs, and other scientists in the NHS. So so we follow us on Twitter. I can't remember the app, but I'm sure you can tell it. So we put together the letter with a lot of suggestions for the school, and I think, you know, it starts a lot earlier, because for us it seems like, and there's research to show that, you know, every single process of the STP application can discriminate by race. You know, there are studies to show that the previous tests that were being used, those psychometric tests, you know, are consistently favor one ethnic group against others because, you know, certain schools in more prevalent areas, because like private schools understand that, you know, education is important, but you also need to know how to function in the working world and how to get those opportunities. And they know how frequently those kind of tests are used. So they might give you an early insight into it. And there's also a financial means to it where you can actually pay to buy packages where you can practice those kind of tests. So, you know, and it's been shown to discriminate there. I think one of the things that we're trying to lobby for with the school is for training, anti-racism training for the people that are reviewing people's answers in terms of the shortlisting process, because we feel like there are certain cultural caveats, especially in the way that the questions were worded. And I think it's even more important now that the questions are more about the job spec, because, you know, like I mentioned earlier, I could talk about something that's culturally significant to me and people from my background may understand, but if interviews aren't taught on that, or you don't have any interviewers from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds or shortlisters, people won't understand that what I'm saying, and we thought that a context needs to be given it to it. You know, if you grow up, you know, in the poorest borough of London, Tower Hamlets, you're to get to the point where you've, you know, completed a bachelor's degree, you've gotten to the point where you're interviewing for the STP. It means you've done a significant amount of work despite the disadvantages that you've had to face. And obviously that needs to be looked at in the context of, it's very different if somebody went to, you know, a private primary school, secondary school, all these, you know, Eton, then you went to Oxford. It's a very, I mean, obviously these are two very extreme examples, but it works, you know, as you move into the middle as well. And I think also the interviewers, you know, people, I think currently the way the school sees it, I think, or the way the wider NHS sees it, is that, you know, they place a reliance on clinicians' own ethic morality that, like, you know, because they're scientists in the NHS, they can't have any biases against gender, sexuality, race. But obviously, that's not the case, you know. The government even released a report recently that said explicitly the NHS is racist, but we have no plans to deal with it. And obviously, an organization isn't racist without individuals in the organization perpetuating that. So we think that there should be far less reliance on the ethnic standards of professionals, and there should be training to do it. Because, for example, we have train the trainer. You don't just get any person that's a qualified clinical scientist to train STP students. They must go through a process in order to make sure that they are at the standard in order to do so. So we feel like that shouldn't be taken for granted, because the STP is an opportunity where you have a paid education and you start the NHS in a pretty senior position, because even nurses can graduate, start on band 5. You know, you're starting on a good banding, and they're cultivating you to develop as a leader. So it's an opportunity to, you know, like break people out of cycles of poverty, give people a professional identity that they didn't think that they could have. So we think it's a very coveted process that really needs a change to it. So I think in terms of specifically the interviewers, we think that they need to be sat down and they need to be trained in order to understand the contextual history of what the NHS looks like. Because I mean, even my old trust, Homerton, my new trust, Bart, you know, I've read both of their like racial equity reports, and you just see how, in terms of banding in the hospitals, broken down by race, you know, black people like all the way up here when it comes to like band 1, 2, 3, and then as it goes to 6, 7, 8, it just takes this disgusting deep dive. And obviously, the people that are interviewing are supposed to be people of higher banding, and then they might not be recruiting people in significant amounts to see those numbers rise. And even the school released its numbers, and they're quite shocking and staggering, in the sense that I think in 2019, about 500 plus people from Black African backgrounds applied for the program. One got in.
It's just shocking. Like,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, carry on. It's just carry on. Tell me what you think. I've talked about a lot.
I think, okay, I've got like two different points, but they kind of link. So the NHS is there to serve the community, the whole community, and without people from every community, we're going to be biased with the healthcare that we provide, not even meaning to. Like, I went to a talk with some genetic counsellors, and there's one Black genetic counsellor in the country, in the whole of the UK.
That's crazy.
And how can you support people from certain communities if you don't understand the backgrounds to why there might be barriers to genetic counselling?
You know, the really interesting context of that is that, for example, the most common serious genetic condition in the UK is sickle cell disease, and obviously that most prevalently affects people from Black and Black African and Caribbean backgrounds. Obviously, it can affect everybody now with the way, you know, people from different ethnic backgrounds, you know, falling in love, having children. Great thing, but it means that sickle cell can transmit, and obviously, typically people think that sickle cell, you know, it's a Black disease, but it's just a genetic mutation that occurred in areas where malaria is prevalent. So you have people from Southern Europe, Greek people, Cypriot people. You know, I think the country with the sickle cell disease is a large consortium of different disorders to do with like sickled hemoglobin. I think the country with the second most amount of people with sickle cell disease is India. You know, after Nigeria is number one. So, and if you think about that, so many people will require genetic counseling in the UK in terms of having children, understanding, you know, genotyping and disease progression within family lineages. And, you know, there are a lot of cultural caveats to sickle cell disease and the way people deal with it. And that's something I developed I started to understand in my previous role, you know, and you don't have people that understand the context. There can be a lot of misinformation. There can be a lot of difficulties in that. And, you know, in the UK, we have quite staggering, I think quite embarrassing, you know, medical outcomes by race. You know, Black women 5 times more likely to die in childbirth, you know, and it has nothing to do with their race because the stats aren't the same in Black majority countries in Africa. It has nothing to do with class because people like very wealthy women have the same experiences. Beyonce had difficulties in childbirth, Serena Williams, you know, 2 very healthy, wealthy women. So it's nothing to do with their class. It's about like the care provision that's being given. And I think if we don't safeguard the people coming into these professions to try to make them more equitable, will continue to stumble. So I think there needs to be a big overhaul in the processes in the interview process, not just to make it more fair for the scientists, but to make sure that our profession is providing the optimum care that it can.
Because otherwise, we're just not providing equal care to all communities. If people don't feel, I am using genetic counselling because that's just the one that I'm most comfortable with, but if people don't see themselves represented in like healthcare, they may be less likely to go and get that counselling because they may not feel like they're going to be understood. And it's the same for like people that may have consanguinity in their family and stuff. They may not feel comfortable coming forward to discuss that, and you can try to, like, you can do as much training as you want and as much training and like being honest and fair and non-judgmental and everything like that, but I think it does just take like anti-racism training to maybe identify those areas in yourself that aren't coming to standard so you can address them.
Yeah, and the thing with like anti-racism is that I think sometimes organizations feel like they're being attacked, but I think one thing I always try to say to them, and you know, I do it to not make them feel more comfortable and be like, okay, you know, I try to minimize people's kind of white guilt to start stopping them from doing it. But I mean, I think when you grow up in a society here, and I think it's something that's spread internationally, I think I think from the moment you're born, you're steeped in this kind of racist soup, and you kind of like just eat like
Like a dumpling.
a bathe in it, like and that's why you have like ethnic bigotry, you know, between even ethnic minority groups. You know, there's things peddled in the media, you know, about Asian grooming gangs or the black kids in London are stabbing everybody. And I think other ethnic groups pick up on this. So it's not just that because somebody is black or Asian, they can't have kind of racist concepts or perpetuate racist kind of workings. It's something that we all need to consistently be rejuvenated on and consistently learn because there are so many things that we do not know. And I think what we're trying to push is that people become educated in it. I think at that point, then we can start to look into something else. But I think the bottom line of it is that people need to understand the context of what it is they're doing and the wider impacts of it all. And you're exactly right. Like so many people from ethnic minority backgrounds, my experience included, won't seek medical attention because professionals won't understand that. I think this is worse for Black women because of just the historical context of it. I think you see it with COVID. I mean, maybe COVID made everybody's eyes open to it because these things aren't down to genetics. It's not down to people's, choice and lifestyle. It's down to the socioeconomic circumstances they're in, I think. And also, if we're kind of like locked in the cycle because definitely for me now, or before I applied, and definitely people from Black backgrounds that are reaching out to me because they want to apply, their first question is not that they're not confident in their ability, they're just very insecure about, are there Black people in this field? Like, am I likely to get in? And I think when you see the number, it's consistently disheartening. So it's stopping genuine talent from entering the profession. I think if we care about the impact of this profession, then we're going to try to make it as equitable as we can. So I think
people should get the job.
Pardon?
The best people should be able to get the job. That's the underlying thing. And without feeling uncomfortable about these things, nothing's going to change. If we just keep pushing down the things that are uncomfortable to talk about and people don't really want to address it because they feel like they're being personally attacked, then nothing is going to change fundamentally.
Yeah, and we kind of have to be specific about it because, I think sometimes people want to, throw everything into this like big bumbling soup of inequality, right? I think one of the biggest barriers we face when we're talking about, because in our group we believe that this process starts from when you're in school because then that affects your grades, affects whether you can go to university or not, affects whether you can get a 2-1 or not, or a first. Which then, as soon as you don't get a 2-1 or a first, you're unable to apply for this program. Just that's there, and we there's a huge attainment gap by a race, right? And then when we're talking about it, people are like, okay, what about the white working class kids? And we're like, that is a very important thing. The socioeconomics of our society is really difficult. But the differentiating factor is that those white working class kids can work their way up. They can use the white privilege they have to gain financial wealth. But even when a Black person does that, they still face consistent blockages. We have people reaching out to our group that are qualified clinical scientists that, for example, should be in a Band 7 position. These people have got their education. They're wealthier than the majority of England now, but they're consistently facing these barriers. So, class is not the great equalizer. Money isn't the great equalizer. Race is consistently something that affects you, whether you're poor or not. So it's another contextual thing that I think people try to minimize the issue to make it seem like, the society is unfair to everyone. And it is unfair to the majority of people. But I think we need to, if we're going to place a focus on this issue and say our agenda right now is anti-racism, then that's going to be our agenda. If our agenda is anti-sexism, that should be our agenda. And of course, these things compartmentalize to certain people, women of color, and both things have to be taken into context. But I think the frustration now is that sometimes with our continuous work with the School of Healthcare Sciences, that they're trying to model up the issue and not make it that one thing. But we will
it's just an extra hurdle, isn't it? Like once you can get over the hurdle of maybe going to uni or whatever, and trying to improve your socioeconomic status, then you've got another hurdle to kind of jump over.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to hear though.
I mean, I just can't imagine what life is like for Black women within the LGBTQ community. It's like barrier after barrier after barrier after barrier. But I think we'll just have to continuously stay motivated to make a more equitable interview process. But yeah, back to
No, I'm really glad we had a chat about it. That was really good.
I think a big overall is due, and I think it needs to start with education of safeguarding and education of the coveted position of shortlister and interviewer. I think it's super important.
Yeah, definitely. So now you're in the role. What do you get up to, like day to day? What have you done so far? I know you're on a study day today, but
so far, obviously, I'm in first year, and I think I'm not sure if it works this way with other specialisms, but I think in first year they kind of push you into the concepts that are going to be simplest for you to understand, and you progress through the more difficult concepts as you develop in your ability. So in neurophysiology, predominantly we perform like a few main tests. An EEG, which is where we look at the electrical activity of the brain. We look at evoked potentials, which is when we look at the electrical activity and function of like the nerves throughout the body. There could be nerves in your eyes or around your body, or your auditory nerves. And then we also do nerve conduction studies, which once again we're looking at the function of your nerves for conditions like carpal tunnel. And there's a lot of other things you can do, like video telemetry, which is where you look at somebody's brain activity for like a week in a go. And then if you really want to get complex, you can do like interoperative monitoring, where you're looking at during brain surgery, spinal surgeries, you're helping the surgeon to guide, where they are going, he or she. Look at that, I said he. That's the training you get when you listen. But yes, she or he, the surgeon doing the surgery, you can help them to guide, to make sure that the prognosis for the patient is good and there's no like significant damage. There are probably a lot of other things I'm missing out. Like in each test, you can like break it down to more specific things. You can do sleep studies, so on and so forth. So I say the thing I was introduced first was the EEG, like a basic outpatient adult EEG, because obviously, you can get inpatients, people's like cerebral dysfunction, or you can get neonates just a few days born, which obviously are very, very, very complex. So I think for me, obviously they started with the most simple concept. So like every day we have outpatients. So I will go in with like a qualified member of staff. I would learn from the basics how to even set up an EEG. And you have to put 23 wires on someone's head in a very specific position. You have to know how to like measure it and actually stick it on. And you need to get like a good connection. You can't get a lot of disturbance or resistance from like the person's hair or electrical devices in the environment. So I think that's basically what I started off on. And that in addition to doing my like additional teaching, like theory with my training and other members of staff. So you're kind of doing the theory, but you're also learning how to apply it on the job. So in neurophys, once you've done the study, you then have to report it. So it's kind of like learning the language of an EEG, like what does it mean? What does it mean in context of this person's age, this person's kind of a medical history? So I think it sounds like not a lot, but it is a lot, and that's what I've been focusing on currently. So more in my first year, I'll have some time to go into audiology, like we discussed earlier, to learn the ropes there. I think for about 6 weeks in total, but my manager prefers to like do it, so I don't spend my whole time there. I kind of do there 1 day a week until I'm competent in that kind of those tests that they do there. I'll do my ophthalmology rotation. You also have to do rotations in like biochemistry, pathology, neuroimaging, just to understand, just so as a scientist, when you graduate into your leadership position, you understand better the patient pathway and you're able to support more the diagnostics. I think as you progress in first year and into second year, then you start to look at inpatients. I know inpatients can be anywhere from A&E in an emergency situation, can be on like a ward, can be on ITU where a patient's intubated and they're having significant care. You can go on to pediatric units, neonatal ICU, and then, oh, I forgot, another test you do is an EMG, which is where you're looking at the muscle activity. So you take like a needle and you put it into someone's muscle and you measure it. Currently, only like consultant doctors are allowed to perform that test. But as part of the STP in neurophys, you have to learn how to do it.
Okay.
Maybe health professions are changing that we will be able to take over at one point. You know, that's more of NHS politics for you. But you have to learn the theory, you have to learn how to do it. But that's obviously it's a very complex thing, so it's more of a third year thing.
Yeah.
So right now, the third year in our department, she's working closely with the consultants to learn that test. So there's a lot of different things, and you know, you get your elective. So currently, the surgery stuff is not performed in my hospital. We get like people, like private companies, to come to do it. I think it's something that I'm really interested in. I really like to do it. In the surgery, a lot of the time you won't just do one test. You'll do like all of the tests in like the space of that time. You can also do like brain mapping to help them kind of guide where they're going. It's all really interesting. So mostly you come across like epilepsy and kind of like every different type of epilepsy ever, from, you know, the really, and it's interesting because you have like let me not say real epilepsy. You have the epilepsy with a medical pathology, and then you have like more of the psychological part of epilepsy, where some people might have dissociative seizures, where, you know, you're not seeing physiological changes, but the person is having seizures, and you can't just accredit it to them that they're crazy. Sometimes they wouldn't. Maybe sometimes people would be doing it for attention, but there is this weird middle ground where it seems like there's not a lot of understanding of it, but it seems like there's something just not clicking. Like their pathology is not changed, but I don't think they're doing it for attention. They're actually experiencing the thing.
So I've got epilepsy.
Yeah.
But it only triggered last summer. But when I went to the EEG, which was interesting but horrible because all the sticky stuff that they put made me look like I had a well greasy hair. It was horrible.
Yeah, it doesn't leave you looking good. It doesn't leave you looking good. But I mean, it's valuable information, and I think. So yeah, that's kind of my current day to day is just still on the outpatient EEGs. I've observed a couple of the other tests, but I think my training officers want me to get a better hand on this before I then start to progress. But I think they're safeguarding, making sure that you're able to do the basic, because it's easy to run up into the difficult stuff, but then you can't. Especially because now as a trainee, you're kind of accompanied when you do the investigations. When you qualify, you're by yourself. You need to be able to troubleshoot. For example, we cover all the hospitals in our trust. So if you've been sent out to another hospital and something goes wrong, you need to be confident to troubleshoot it. And if it's a basic concept that you haven't been able to do, you've wasted a lot of time and a lot of resource. So yeah, but currently, I've been redeployed to help fight COVID. So I'm helping out on a polytrauma unit. So patients that have had surgery within like the last 24 to 72 hours after like some sort of traumatic injury. And it's essentially in a healthcare assistant capacity where I'm supporting the nurses. So I mean, I've learned a lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily do in neurophys, like personal care for patients, taking observations, changing beds, which is a lot more complicated than I thought. You know, manual handling, moving patients. Especially a lot of these patients are immobile, so you have to use like things like what's it called? I can't remember, the hoist.
Yeah.
Or like, all these different things. I think it's a good understanding, because in neurophys, when you do go onto the ward, you're there for like an hour at the most. You conduct your investigation, you leave, and you report later on. You don't spend 8-9 hours a day on the ward to see how it functions. So it's definitely a different experience. It's not easy, and it's not per se what I like to do. And obviously, they can't give me the kind of high acuity complex stuff because I'm not a qualified nurse. So I do like the other things to help them out. But it's definitely been a learning experience.
But it's interesting as well, like on a more general level, just to see how much we actually do for ourselves day to day, even if it doesn't feel like we do.
Yeah.
Like we stop ourselves getting bed sores. We can roll ourselves onto our tummy at night if we want to. Like,
yeah, it's very. I mean, it's different, and then handling it, because I think some of these patients, they will be in the hospital for quite a long time. You just see the phases you go through, you know, after your surgery, you still have that epidural block in you. You think you're okay, I can go home. And then, you know, the pain, the analgesia starts to like knock off and they just go into this like frustrated, depressive phase. And then they get used. It's very interesting to see like a rehabilitation, like watch the physio do their work as well. It's really good.
How long have you been on rotation? No, sorry. How long have you been on the redeployment?
This redeployment I've been in since last week. I've been since 2 weeks now. I will say that I think I'm ready to go back to my department. I think I'm bigging it up. Obviously, a lot of the time you kind of can be doing nothing because, you know, I think wards have their especially because it's not a COVID ward, so like it's not everybody's not running around and that. And the trauma wards are kind of protected because you will always need that space because even in the context of COVID, there are car accidents, biking accidents, and so forth. So yeah, you do spend a lot of time just in the downtime, just standing there. But I mean, I have learned some cool things.
That's good. How have you found it in total, like since starting in September?
I think this is the first time I've had to manage this amount of work to do, and I think at the start of the STP, I don't know if you'd agree, it's really easy to feel lost because you've got a lot of uni work to do. If you're like me, you haven't done a master's before, so you have that quantity and quality of work required. You've never really done a competency before, so you don't really know what it involves.
Yeah.
You have this huge list of competencies you have to finish, and you don't really know what you need for each of them. And then you have and it's really hard not to compare yourself to other trainees in your department and across your specialism. So you can feel a little bit lost. It's like, what am I supposed to tackle first? You know, you have your on-the-job theory training. You've got your competencies, which can be about things that aren't necessarily to do with what you're doing, about infection control and so forth. And then you have like your deep theory of what you're doing. And then you have your university stuff, which is partly about your specialism, but it's also about NHS care provision, quality, leadership. There's a lot of stuff like, what the hell do I focus on first? So it can be very disillusioning at first, and you can be like, am I good enough to do this? You can have this a little bit of an imposter syndrome. But I think the more people you reach out to, more people that are on the STP have finished the STP. I mean, even in our department, we have PTP, which is like the undergraduate level, kind of similar kind of thing to the STP. You can ask them. I mean, the more people you reach out to and the more kind of guidance you get, the more comfortable you feel, and kind of consistently speaking with your training officer to see kind of where you are, what you're doing well on, what you're lacking on. I think that's something I had to do the other day before I went back to uni next week. I had to ask like, hey, what am I doing well at? What do I need to improve? Where am I? Because it's hard to gauge because some of these things you're supposed to complete over 3 years and you don't want to get like lost in it all.
Yeah.
I think it's been good. I think it's a big opportunity for exposure. You have to kind of be confident to ask for what you want, which is hard in first year because really you should just be a sponge kind of everything. But sometimes, you know, there can be blockages to your learning. And I think what I'm learning is that you kind of have to speak up and ask for what you want to do as well as the mandated parts of your training.
Especially at the moment, I think, just because obviously there's so much pressure on different departments, that it is just important to remember as well that it's your training.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, you need to come out feeling confident in what we've been taught. So if you feel like you need to go back and do something again, you just need to ask.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the department's priority right now is to help the hospital and its trust to manage the current situation as well as possible. Sometimes your training can be a lesser priority, and you kind of have to have the confidence to stand up for that and ask. And I'm sure, you know, when whatever time arises, definitely in my department, people are willing to help. So yeah, it's good. I think I'm excited to carry on and progress in the STP and kind of see where it takes me. And I think the good thing is that although, you know, there are competencies and things you have to be competent to qualify, you know, it's up to you kind of what you want to do additionally and how you want to expand the things you want to get involved in. which is why I kind of wanted to be in this type of program that, you know, I am being directed in a certain position, but there is scope for me to,
Yeah,
you know, move things around if I want to.
definitely. It's not like well, there is kind of a syllabus, but it's not
Yeah,
hard and fast. Everyone can approach it in different ways. So
yeah.
as long as you're just doing what's good for you and gets you there.
What about you? How are you finding it? Because you're in first year.
Yeah, it's good. So we're not like based in the hospital. I've not been redeployed or anything. I'm working from home at the moment, which has its ups and downs. I think I have been enjoying it just because I can be with my cat, but it's now starting to just weigh a bit. Like I think I need to see some other people.
Yeah,
So I think I am going to start going back into work a little bit. So that'll be nice.
yeah. It's good. I think it's been very hard. Like COVID has been very. It's a bit soft, but not really soft. I'd say it's been very disruptive to our training.
Mm.
Because obviously we only have a finite amount of time and funding to do what we need to do. So it's been hard. Definitely, I think everyone is in such different situations as well. But I mean, what is life like in like the life sciences kind of thing? 'Cause I only know about, I don't know what our part of it is called, but I know it's not like biochemistry or genetics or hematology. So what is the day to day like?
So genetics is very non-patient facing. We get their samples, we test their samples, we report on what we find. But it can be quite, not personal, but it can be quite like patiently personal, if that makes sense, because you might see one person and then because of their test results, their family members might come in and get tested.
Mhm.
So you kind of have that backlog and you go back to the original test to compare it against that. And it's quite a like changing part of healthcare at the moment, I think, because we're moving into more wide ranging genome sequencing and things. So it is really interesting. We're not patient facing, we're also not in the lab. That's like the genetic technologists that do the lab work.
Yeah,
But I quite like the analysis side. I feel like it's quite a lot of problem solving or like being a detective. I quite like that side of it.
Mhm.
But we'll be moving into bioinformatics next, which I'm terrified about because I'm not a big computer person. But I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah, bioinformatics was probably the hardest part of my undergrad. Like, but I feel like genetics, bioinformatics, it's like the future of science. Like that's where, in terms of therapies and patient specific, patient orientated, personalized medicine, you guys will be leading the front on that. So I think that's very exciting.
It is really exciting. And I think at the moment there is just so much scope for finding out about things, which I didn't want to go into like a PhD background. I didn't want to study one tiny thing
Yeah,
for 3 years and then maybe find out whether it relates to healthcare or not. So I
yeah,
think being able to screen people that don't have diagnoses yet and give them something that might be actionable at the end is where it fits in well. But we've got the counselling rotation as well.
hmm
I feel like I'm going to have to get some coping strategies because, as I said earlier, if someone cries, I'm probably going to cry right back.
yeah. But you know what? It's good. I think patients appreciate your humanness in a situation and being able to show that empathy.
Yeah.
Maybe not to cry because then they will get scared and it will be a whole. To empathize but to instill confidence in them would be good. I think.
Definitely. So yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely a bit different just because of the virtual side of things.
Yeah.
But it'll be nice to get back into work to show my face again and remind people that I do still exist.
Yeah, like it must be hard. I think for trainees that barely got to spend any time in the department and now are at home, it might be a bit alienating.
It is a little bit. Like everyone is so lovely, and I know that you can speak to anyone when you want. And we've got a really big trainee pool at Birmingham, which is nice. There's 2 cancer genomics and 2 genomics this year with me. And then in the whole STP group in cancer genomics and bioinformatics and the genomics screen, there's like 15 of us. So
Okay.
just having that kind of network of people that you can talk to is really nice at the moment. What about you? Are there any other trainees in your year? Or
So I'm the only neurophys in my trust. I think with all the trusts that do neurophys, I think there's like 6 spaces and there's one at each. But there are 2 trainees ahead. So there's one in second year, one in third year. And then there are other trainees in the trust. And I have like our BAME network, which is people from BAME backgrounds and white advocates. So it's good. I think I have some sort of a network. Not many people do what I do. So I try to make sure to find also people that do what I do to engage with. But I think it's good to see what everybody else is doing.
yeah. I'm so nosy. I love hearing about what other people are doing.
Yeah.
So, Fab, it was so nice to speak with you today. Have you got any like other top tips or anything that you wanted to say, like any advice?
Top tips. I think with the new structure, I think people that are applying should definitely leverage whatever experience that they have. So even if you worked at Sainsbury's in your undergrad or you were a delivery driver, like I think everything can be used contextually to show a skill and to show your ability and suitability for this program. I think you shouldn't feel daunted by the fact that you haven't had experience in industry or experience in NHS. Use whatever you have. Use your undergrad degree or your postgrad degree to help. I think to be confident there are people behind the scenes trying to make the process a lot more equitable for people to be successful in it. And I think just to go through it, I think both of us applied for this more than once. I think it's highly competitive, but to stay confident, I think it will be worth it. And I feel like it's a profession that's changing consistently. I think with the way they're trying to expand healthcare roles, take pressure off professionals like nurses and doctors, giving clinical scientists more scope, more function. So I think that's an exciting thing to apply for. So yeah, I can't really give you tips on the educational judgment. I think the schools release some resources and just work on that. I think NHS Value will probably look into that. And then the questions, yeah, just whatever experience you have, use it to your advantage. And at the interview, just be yourself, but make sure you study your stuff because they won't go easy on you.
Yeah, definitely. Are you all right if I link the BAME network just in the things that I put out? Or
Please do. I think we're trying to widen the network, and I think the hard thing is that because there's so many people in different spaces doing different things, it's hard to connect to everybody. So I think the more we can get out to people, I think definitely we want to be to the trainees that are on the program. I think we want to be a space as a support system. So something we're trying to organize with the school is that if you feel like you've been discriminated against by your disability, your gender, your sexuality, and your race by your training base where you train. I think we want to be a place where people can come to in order to get advice and to hopefully put you into links with people that can help you. I think a lot of trainings, because we can be so spread out and some people in really satellite spaces, you can experience some things which you have to deal with by yourself, which then on top of all the work you have to do can hinder your progress. So I think if you are having any difficulties, please reach out to us and we will try to do what we can. I think we've been in contact with some alumni who have gone through some really tough experiences during their training and they didn't have anyone to support them with it. And we're kind of working with them to understand what we could have done, what they would have enjoyed or what they would have benefited from in that time. And also to hear from trainees now to see what scope we can provide.
I bet it can feel uncomfortable for you personally to raise it to your training officer or whatever if it's within your trust itself. So it's probably good to reach out to a group like yours just to get some advice. Fab. Well, thank you very much, and have a lovely rest of your study day. I hope it's productive.
Thanks for inviting me to do this. You're doing really, really good work, I think. You're definitely spreading the word about this program and this opportunity. And I think the format is really good.
Thank you. Always good to get some feedback. And so are you as well. I think your groups, I follow them on everything. I think it's really nice. I can't believe there's not been one before, but
yeah, it's weird, but
it's good that there's one now.
Yeah.
Fab. Well, have a nice day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.